I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Nick Kawakami. Born and raised on Oahu, he has a varied past of working as part of a family business, being a touring musician, and now a real estate agent. Nick will share his story about changing expectations and how those come about in different chapters of our life.
Thank you, Mariko. And thank you to Civil Beat for having all of us today. You know, when they asked me to go to come and do this today, my first initial thought was that there are a lot of other much more worthy realtors on this island with much more experience and, much better stories that they could tell. But, I agreed, and, I know Mariko, so I wanted to make her happy too. So I went online and I said, okay, so if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this right. And I started looking at YouTube, watching TED Talks, watched old Civil Beat. And it's amazing because it was like instant change. I was like, oh man, okay, so I'm going to go do this speech, then it's going to go viral, then I'm going to be this like paid speaker, I'm going to travel all around the world, write books. I built this expectation up so high look at these notes that I've made. They are color-coded. They are written very big because I went on a website and they said, you got to do it this way. I built tonight up so huge with the expectation in my head. And what's ironic about that whole thing is that my job as a real estate agent here in Hawaii is all about managing expectations. It's whether it's somebody coming in from the mainland and, they have the expectation, well, I came from a 5-bedroom, 3-bath house on an acre of property and I got that for 50 grand, What can you get here for that? I'm like, well, Ko'olave maybe in 20 years or something when that opens up, but it's also on the other end, right? It's the people that live here that, that grew up here, especially like first-time homebuyers, They see the headlines in the news. They see, record high median prices, and they go, there's no way that I can even afford a condo here. And, part of my job is to just show them, you can do that. Maybe you start off in a small studio, but you build equity and you through the years, you get married, you partner, and you can get there. You can eventually, I've seen it numerous times. All of our parents did it, and it still happens today. And of course, right now, with my wife in the audience, I'm going through my own series of those expectations. But it's funny, right? We all bring our expectations to all parts of our lives, not just home buying. It's a culmination of our experiences, of our opinions. It's really, where we come from builds those expectations for our present day experiences. And mine starts back on the hills of Aina Haina with my parents' first home. It was Aina Haina is a dry place. I remember the yard was, we could only hang out in the backyard because it was on a steep hill. I was no more than 3. But that house to me, as I remember it, was a playhouse. I was 3, right? My dad had a dartboard on the wall. We were very uncoordinated because we were 3. And so, we threw the darts, made dents in the wall, pissed my mom off. But, it was super fun for us. We would shoot the hose in the back, play the dogs. That first house to me was a playroom. And then as we moved into our family house in Manoa, that expectation kind of changed a little bit because now this is where my family was really putting down roots. And it became more of a social expectation with my parents. My mom likes to tell a story and she made me promise today that I tell the story of the fact that she found the last house in Manoa for under $300,000. Of course, this was 30 years ago. But still this day, she's like, yeah, it was the last one. It looked like the only house under $300,000, as I remember it. But she saw the value. She saw the potential. And it became, and her view, her goal for a house was to have a place that launched family memories. And I remember, everything from Christmases on the front porch with my uncle dressing up as Santa, and us kids being 5 and 6 years old, we were so bent on proving the fact that it was Uncle Neil. Or they even 8th grade dance. That was the first dance for Punahou with that we had. So I invited a couple friends over, and of course, because it was the first dance, we put on ties and it's posed for pictures, and those poses were super lame now, but back then, right, it was the coolest thing. Do you guys remember Cool Water? Is that still a thing? It was this cologne that was the bee's knees, if I can showcase how cool I am by saying bee's knees. I drenched myself in that stuff. But it was, no matter what the different scenario was, it became a launch point for all of our memories. It became a launch point for all adventures in life. And when I went off to college, when I went off to Oregon, I really wanted to keep a lot of those things that I experienced, those expectations that I had. Of course, it was completely different, right? Because I'm living on my own. I got my own space, which, I really enjoyed. That became my new expectation because, cool, I get to live on my own. I get to, do whatever I want. But I found myself really longing for some of the aspects that I had had from home. And in particular, that sense of family togetherness. And what I did my senior year, I moved in with 5 guys from Hawaii, and I instituted family dinners. And a couple nights a week, 2 guys cooked, 2 guys cleaned, but we all sat down at the table together, and we really recreated that family experience that I love so much. When I came back home, expectations changed again. I went from living on my own, having my own house, my own furniture, my own posters on the wall, back into my childhood home, my room. And I did my best, right? I set up a TV. I got my Barker Lounger. I was like the cool guy. Barker Lounger in his room. Mom, I need some pot stickers. Yeah, I was that kid. But, but that change from college back home was a change of expectations again, because I had lost that freedom. I'd lost that ability to spread out and to, I had to downgrade my space. I also had to downgrade my privacy because I was living with my parents again. And oh, good. I did that on purpose because I don't know why. But I quickly learned that I did want to change those, reinvigorate that feeling of being on my own. So a couple months later, I decided to move out, and I lived in various places. And, each place was good, but I eventually landed on purchasing my first condo in Makiki. And I really loved it because, again, I had that independence. I was on my own, and I was able to, I took the kitchen and I gutted it, and I really made it my own space, and really something that, reflected those same feelings that I had in Oregon, those same expectations. The problem was, right, the challenge to those expectations was I lost that social aspect. I was no longer with my family. I was no longer with my roommates. And even though I was willing to change throughout all of these different aspects of my living situation, of what I thought of home, it was still a challenge to me. And it really taught me what my dad always says, which is, nothing is perfect in life. And if you're willing to change, if you're willing to adjust those expectations, then maybe you can just find something that is magical. Now, speaking of magic, I just got married in October to my wife, who's sitting there. Oh, good. Thank you for clapping. Thank you. I'm getting brownie points for your clapping, so thanks for that. And coincidentally, right now, we are actually starting our own adventure to find a home. But ironically, it started off, I should say, a little rocky, because when we first started talking about where we wanted to live, we did exactly the opposite of what I do with my clients. We went out, we just said, oh yeah, so we're gonna go look at houses. I'm sure we can afford this X thing. And so we're gonna go look at houses, see if it fits, whatever. And we just started going out and looking at houses. And we didn't sit down and discuss those expectations that each of us brought to the table. And luckily, we've gone through that, before. But, we didn't establish what each of us wanted, what each of us desired to get out of it, what our expectation was, and what the experiences that we wanted. I was basically the Koho'olave guy. I was like, oh yeah, we can afford this, don't worry, without any knowledge of if we actually could. And so, the thing is, right, and now with my wife, I realize that expectations of home, while they can change, they are important. And part of the journey that I went through on my own personal side when I was, when we were thinking about getting a house with my wife, was evaluating where my experiences came from. Those things that I talked about today, all of my houses, all of my wonderful experiences that I've had in my life, and how those shaped the expectations that I bring in today. Because in actuality, right, this is going to be my home. This is where I'm going to hopefully start a family. This is where I'm going to, launch all of my memories from. And because home is so special. Thank you.